On a bare ridge in southeastern Turkey, stone pillars rise from the earth like a message from a forgotten age. They are older than cities, older than writing, and they seem to ask the same question we still do. Who built this, and why? Göbekli Tepe sits near the edge of the Fertile Crescent, where farming would later transform human life. Yet this place appears to belong to a time before settled civilization, when hunter-gatherers were supposed to be too simple for monuments of this scale. That contradiction is what makes the site so unsettling. If the dating is right, people here were shaping and moving massive stones thousands of years before the pyramids, and long before anyone expected such ambition. For decades, the mound looked like an ordinary hill. Then archaeologists began to uncover a hidden architecture below it, and the ground itself started to suggest a buried world of ritual, planning, and lost knowledge. The first shock was the age. Radiocarbon dating placed some of the earliest activity around the 10th millennium BCE at a threshold so early that it forces a rethink of what prehistoric people could organize together. Then came the scale. Some of the carved pillars weigh many tons, and they were not just placed in the ground, but arranged into precise enclosures that still feel deliberate, if not almost ceremonial. Look closely, and the stones become stranger. Many pillars carry reliefs of foxes, snakes, boars, birds, and other animals, as if the builders were encoding a symbolic world rather than merely stacking rock. Some supporters of ancient alien speculation see those carvings as more than art. They point to the precision, the planning, and the sheer effort involved, asking whether a very old tradition of sky knowledge could be hidden here. The idea gains force because Göbekli Tepe seems to sit outside the usual story of progress. Instead of agriculture creating monuments, the monument appears first, as though belief or instruction arrived before the plow. That reversal matters, if people gathered here before permanent villages. What kind of social power could mobilize so many hands? And what kind of purpose would justify moving stone across open ground? The most compelling detail may be the layout itself. The enclosures are not random piles of stone. They feel composed, with central pillars facing one another like silent figures in a carefully staged encounter. That human-like shape has fed speculation for years. The pillars are often read as stylized bodies, and in that reading the site begins to resemble a place of presence, memory, or contact with something beyond the ordinary. Supporters of the extraordinary interpretation also linger on the craftsmanship. The stone surfaces are worked with a confidence that feels surprising for such an early period, and the carvings are arranged with clear intention. Yet the site does not speak in one voice. Some layers show later backfilling, deliberate burial, and repeated modification, suggesting a long ritual history rather than a single dramatic event. That buried history is part of the mystery. Why would builders invest so much effort in raising these enclosures only to cover them over again? As if sealing away a sacred place from the world, the conventional reading is powerful in its own way. Many archaeologists see Göbekli Tepe as proof that ritual gathering can come before farming and that complex belief systems may have helped create civilization rather than follow it. Even so, the site keeps inviting larger questions. If early people could coordinate this much labor, what else might have been possible in the deep past that never survived in stone or story? This is where lost civilization theories enter the frame. For some, Göbekli Tepe feels less like an isolated anomaly and more like a surviving fragment of a much older, erased chapter of human history. They point to the speed with which knowledge can vanish. A few generations of collapse, climate stress, or migration can erase techniques, stories, and skills that once seemed permanent. That possibility does not require a spacecraft to feel dramatic. It only requires a civilization, or a proto-civilization, whose memory was broken before later cultures could inherit the full record. Still, the strongest mystery remains the same. How did people with no metal tools, no wheels in common use, and no settled urban base quarry, transport, and raise stones of this size? The question is not whether they were capable in some broad sense. It is whether the organization behind the work was more advanced than we usually imagine, or guided by knowledge now lost to us. There are also broader echoes. Across the world, ancient sites often pair monumental stone, sacred geometry, and sky-oriented symbolism, as if early cultures were responding to a shared set of questions above them. That is why sky teacher myths keep resurfacing in these discussions. When traditions speak of beings from above bringing knowledge, modern minds naturally wonder whether such stories preserve a memory of contact, inspiration, or something else entirely. Skeptics question that leap, and fairly so. Myths can grow from many human experiences, including awe, astronomy, and the need to explain origins without turning every symbol into evidence of visitors. But even the skeptical reading leaves room for wonder. If ancient people were tracking the heavens, building ceremonial places, and encoding meaning in stone, then their intelligence was far richer than the old stereotypes allow. The site also raises a quieter question about memory itself. Why did later generations not continue building in the same style? And what chain of knowledge broke between this world and the ones that followed? Sometimes the most unsettling part is the silence. There is no surviving writing from the builders, no explanation carved into the pillars, only form, symbol, and the stubborn fact of the stones themselves. That silence leaves multiple possibilities open. Göbekli Tepe may mark the rise of organized ritual before agriculture, or it may preserve the edge of a much older tradition that history only partially remembers. Either way, the site refuses to stay small. It changes the scale of the prehistoric world, and it makes the boundary between known history and speculative prehistory feel thinner than we like to admit. And that is why the ancient alien idea keeps returning here. Not because the stones prove it, but because the stones seem to belong to a human story larger and stranger than the textbook version. Maybe the builders were entirely human, but humans with a lost depth of organization, symbolism, and ambition. Or maybe the site preserves a fragment of influence we still do not know how to name.